Comrades, let's start today with a bizarre historical riddle. Have you ever seen any photo or video clip of Kim Jong-un together with his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, the founding father of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea? Well, Kim Jong-un's exact year of birth remains a mystery, but it is confirmed that he was born in the early 1980s. His granddad, the great leader Kim Il-sung, was kept alive until 1994. If you've watched enough North Korean state media, you know Kim Il-sung absolutely loved cameras. He spent his final decades being photographed doting on children, hugging peasants, greeting foreign visitors, and basking in the adoration of the masses. Yet, there is a glaring, highly suspicious black hole in the kingdom's massive visual archives. There is not a single, solitary photograph of Kim Jong-un appearing beside Kim Il-sung. Not even one. In a regime where images of the leaders are treated as holy relics of a national god, this is the ultimate political anomaly. Why? Did the state simply lose those precious film rolls? No, comrades. The truth is far darker, far more toxic, and it lies at the very heart of the royal family's psychological house of horrors. Kim Jong-un has no photo with his granddad because he likely never met Kim Il-sung. For the first 10 years of his life, his very existence was a classified state secret. The little Kim was literally a ghost, hidden away in luxurious yet heavily fortified bunkers because his birth was a political biohazard. For decades, North Korea's official line has been that the kingdom is ruled successively by the sacred Paektu bloodline. But behind Pyongyang's beautiful skylines, the royal court is a highly compartmentalized Darwinian snake pit. Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, was a paranoid polygamist who hid his unofficial wives and mistresses in isolated palaces scattered across the countryside. Kim Jong-un's mother, Ko Yong-hui, was a Zainichi Korean dancer born in Osaka, whose own father had spent World War II making uniforms for the Japanese imperial war machine. In the rigid North Korean caste system, this Japanese connection placed her family at the absolute bottom of the hostile class. If Kim Il-sung had ever discovered that his son had fathered children with a woman of corrupted Japanese blood, Kim Jong-il's succession to the throne would have evaporated overnight. So, they hid the boy. And the people who guarded his cage? His aunt, Kim Kyung-hui, and his uncle, Jang Song-taek. The very uncle Kim Jong-un would later execute with an anti-aircraft gun. Growing up in this emotional vacuum, Kim Jong-un didn't have any friends. He had private tutors, heavily armed guards, and an older half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, who was the rightful Confucian heir, a rival he would eventually have assassinated with VX nerve agent in a Malaysian airport. In this episode, we investigate the story behind arguably the most toxic family on Earth, how a childhood of extreme isolation, bloodline paranoia, and systemic lies shaped the psyche of the man who now holds a nuclear trigger. We look at how a lack of grandfatherly approval turned into a bizarre adult coping mechanism of physical role play, and how the blood-soaked purge of his own uncle was actually a belated act of psychological revenge. Before the royal drama unfolds, it's time for our weekly ritual. A massive salute to our channel members who patronize our research and production. You're our financial lifeline, So we don't need to sell sketchy VPN services to make a living. Thank you, sincerely. And for new comrades, consider hitting that subscribe button to keep our supreme producer happy. With that said, buckle up. Let's dig in.
Our wish is to build a thriving nation of Juche, a lifelong desire of leader Kim Jong-il, supporting the great General Kim Jong-un. General, we will realize your desire by all means. General, the army you brought up will not remain crying. Will be stronger. Will resolutely safeguard the great General Kim Jong-un with the guns.
As the old saying goes, like father, like son. Our supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, has an eccentric personality, practically a heavyweight man-child with infinite temper tantrums, constantly threatening the world with his nuclear bottom. But it's not entirely his fault. A child's misbehavior is usually the father's fault. In the state propaganda, the Kim family is portrayed as a sacred dynasty of socialist purity. But the ground-level reality inside the royal court was less of a family and more of a highly compartmentalized, deeply paranoid harem. Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, was a notorious obsessive playboy, a man who loved high-priced French cognac, imported movies, and a revolving door of wives, consorts, and mistresses. Yet, despite his extensive love life, the dear leader was a true hermit king when it came to his domestic affairs. He kept his private life under absolute wraps and never once appeared in public with an official wife or partner. Unlike Western leaders, or even modern Chinese and Russian heads of state who occasionally brought their spouses to international events, Kim Jong-il never once appeared in public with an official wife. During his reign, the concept of a first lady simply didn't exist in North Korea. But again, a child's emotional deformation is almost always inherited from the father. The great leader Kim Il-sung's marriage life wasn't that simple either. Long before Kim Jong-il was born, Kim Il-sung married a woman named Han Song-hui in China as early as 1937. Unfortunately, the brave Lady Han was captured by the Japanese army, and Kim Il-sung believed she was dead. She wasn't. She survived the interrogations and the prison. But by the time the Independence War ended, Kim Il-sung had moved on to his next chapter of revolutionary romance and remarried to a lady called Kim Jong-suk. Kim Jong-suk bore Kim Il-sung 3 children. His eldest son, Kim Jong-il, born in a Soviet military camp as Yura, a second son named Kim Man-il, and a daughter, Kim Kyung-hui, who later married the treasonous uncle Jang Song-taek. Sadness hit the household early. In 1947, 3-year-old Kim Man-il tragically drowned in a pond at the family's official residence in Pyongyang. Young Kim Jong-il watched his little brother's lifeless body being pulled from the water, a core childhood trauma that left him terrified of deep water and permanently paranoid about personal security. 2 years later, in September 1949, tragedy struck again. The revolutionary mother, Kim Jong-suk, died suddenly at the age of 31 due to medical complications while giving birth to a stillborn child. The future dear leader was just 7 years old. Overnight, the boy was left without a mother, thrust into a merciless world where his father was no longer a benevolent dad, but a rising, godlike communist monarch. If the death of his mother orphaned young Kim Jong-il emotionally, his father's third marriage declared war on him politically. Around 1952, During the height of the Korean War, the great leader married his personal secretary, Kim Jong-il, a young, ambitious, and politically savvy woman. Kim Jong-il bore the family 3 new children, a daughter, Kim Kyung-jin, and 2 sons, Kim Pyong-il and Kim Yong-il. Kim Jong-il and his little sister were suddenly pushed to the margins of the royal household. Kim Jong-il acted as North Korea's official first lady, hosting foreign dignitaries and building her own political faction through the Korean Democratic Women's Union. As the incumbent wife, Kim Jong-il openly groomed her own son, Kim Pyong-il, attempting to replace Kim Jong-il as the successor. From an outsider's perspective, Pyong-il was tall, athletic, and handsomely resembled his father. He was a stark contrast to the short, introverted, movie-obsessed Kim Jong-il, who wouldn't appear in film roles without platform shoes. The royal court essentially split into 2 bitter, bloodthirsty camps. Kim Jong-il and his sister Kim Jong-hee represented the deceased mother of the nation. Kim Jong-il and her sons represented the stepmother's ambition. For young Kim Jong-hee, the trauma was so deep that she famously refused to call Kim Jong-il mother or even acknowledge her existence. She and Kim Jong-il clung to each other in a cold, hostile palace, bonding over a shared, burning hatred for their stepfamily. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Kim Jong-il fought a silent, ruthless palace war against his stepfamily to reclaim his father's favor and to secure his position as the rightful heir. He used his position in the party's propaganda and agitation department to build a massive, obsessive cult of personality around his deceased biological mother, Kim Jong-suk, painting her as a revolutionary saint while systematically undermining Kim Jong-il's allies. That's the reason why the revolutionary history of Kim Jong-suk is still being taught as a mandatory course in North Korean schools. But more importantly, Kim Jong-il learned a fundamental lesson about palace power struggles. Family is not a sanctuary of unconditional love. It is a battleground of political leverage where competing mothers and half-brothers will stop at nothing to steal your crown. So, when Kim Pyong-il grew older and began throwing raucous parties where the crowds reportedly shouted, "Long live Kim Pyong-il," Kim Jong-il seized the moment. He immediately reported this treasonous arrogance to his father, noting that his half-brother was trying to replace the heroic daddy to usurp the throne. So, with a lifelong exile of his half-brother, Kim Jong-il won the succession war. Kim Pyong-il was banished to Europe, spending 4 decades as an ambassador in diplomatic purgatory in socialist allied countries like Yugoslavia and Bulgaria, effectively a gilded prisoner prevented from ever setting foot in Pyongyang's core political circle. The brutal succession battle during childhood forever shaped our dear leader's marriage view. He viewed love not as a matter of personal affection, but a liability. Wives are political actors in the royal courts, not lovers who nurture children. He approached his own romantic life like the director of a compartmentalized spy agency. He kept his wives, consorts, and children hidden in separate fortified compounds across the countryside, ensuring that no single mother could ever build any clique strong enough to challenge him in the court, and no half-brothers could ever plot together to steal his crown. Kim Jong-un was precisely raised in this environment.
Kim Jong-il said to the officials, "I share the great leader's motto, serve the working masses and let flowers bloom even on a rock if this is the people's desire. This is my Alpha and Omega." This idea has been embodied in every aspect of the people's living, in the solution of traffic problem for one thing.
Having lived his entire youth under a bloody palace battle against his stepmother, Kim Jong-il grew up with a very specific, deeply paranoid approach to family life. We've covered Kim Jong-il's web of secret wives in an earlier episode, so we won't rehash every detail here. Kim Jong-il, like any medieval king, was a polygamist who constructed an entire ecosystem about his harem. He had at least 7 wives and consorts, and as many as 7 known children. It's much less crazy than the Saudi royal family, but still pretty impressive for a socialist dynastic republic. In his early years, Kim Jong-il worked in the propaganda and film industries, and that job opportunity gave him unusual access to actresses, singers, and dancers. It was essentially the ultimate perks package for a playboy prince. As the head of the country's film and show businesses, Kim Jong-il's real job wasn't reviewing movie scripts, but selecting beautiful ladies for his own satisfaction. He hand-picked performers for music ensembles, hosted lavish private banquets fueled by imported Hennessy, and established the infamous Gipyeomjo, the pleasure squads, a curated troupe of young women tasked with providing entertainment, massage, and companionship for the regime's inner circle. It was how the dear leader married the North Korean film star Song Hye-rim and gave birth to his elder son, Kim Jong-nam. And it was how Kim Jong-il met the woman who would forever change the trajectory of the country, Ko Yong-hui. In the 70s, North Korean talent scouts operated like a highly secret, nationwide drafting agency. Party officials scoured middle schools and high schools across the country, looking for specific physical metrics: height, facial structure, vocal range, and natural grace. If a girl met the strict aesthetic standards required for state propaganda, or the leader's taste, she would be sent to Pyongyang for further artistic training. With exceptional beauty and style, the art departments might even temporarily overlook her political background. Yes, it was a state draft. When the party decides you are going to dance for the motherland, you dance, and no refusal. It was under this circumstance Ko Yong-hui, Kim Jong-un's mother, was selected into the Mansudae art troupe. She was selected due to a distinct, tragically ironic advantage over her local peers. Ko had spent her formative early childhood in the booming post-Second World War Osaka, Japan, where she had access to vastly better nutrition and cultural exposure than the average North Korean child recovering from the ashes of the Korean War. Yes, comrade, Kim Jong-un's mother was born as a Japanese national. The entire myth of the Paektu bloodline is about the sacred, anti-imperialist Kim family fighting off the Japanese. But the current supreme leader's mom was born in the very imperialist enemy state. Let's start with Kim Jong-un's maternal grandfather, Ko Gyeon-taek. Born on Jeju Island in 1913, he moved to Osaka, Japan, in 1929. The immigration itself wasn't a big deal back then. He was a part of the larger movement of impoverished Jeju Islanders to industrial Japan. But guess who Ko's employer was in Osaka? That's right, Ko worked for Japan's Ministry of War. When Kim Jong-un's paternal grandpa was freezing in the Manchurian wilderness, heroically fighting against Japanese colonizers, his maternal grandpa worked in a Japanese sewing factory under the Imperial Army's control. Ko Gyeon-taek's literal job was to manufacture the military uniforms for the Japanese army. It's such a profound irony that Kim Il-sung's future in-law was supplying the soldiers who were trying to have him killed. Wait, it even gets better. After the war, Ko Gyeon-taek didn't settle down into a quiet life. He operated his business as an illegal immigrant and became a smuggler, running illicit cargo ships between Japan and South Korea. Ko lived a complicated double life. He spontaneously maintained 3 households, with at least 3 different women in Japan. In the early 1960s, with Japanese police cracking down on his smuggling operations and South Korea threatening deportation, he needed an escape route. So, he jumped on a repatriation ship to the socialist paradise of North Korea. Hearing this crazy plan, Ko's legal wife flat out refused to go. He packed up one of his mistresses, a bold woman named Lee Meng-in, and their 10-year-old daughter, Ko Yong-hui, and sailed off to Pyongyang. When the Ko family arrived on that repatriation ship in 1962, the daughter, Ko Yong-hui, was taller, healthier, and possessed a certain cosmopolitan refinement that made her stand out in a sea of impoverished and traumatized comrades. Her natural beauty and her undeniable world-class talent for traditional dancing soon outclassed her less glorious Japanese background. Besides, as a father, Ko Gyeon-taek was terrible but not stupid. He didn't honestly report himself as an ex-worker for the Imperial Army. The North Korean record simply says he worked in a civilian clothing factory. Most of the new info came from a Japanese journalist named Yoji Gomi, who was a friend of Kim Jong-nam and did extensive research on the Kim family through Japanese archival sources and interviews with Ko's relatives in Osaka. In short, the Ko family successfully cheated the North Korean authorities and passed the background check. Ko Yong-hui was pulled from the shadows of her repatriate status and thrust into the spotlight of the Mansudae art troupe. By the early 70s, she had risen to become one of their leading stars, dancing center stage in those state-choreographed revolutionary operas. And it was right there, under the theatrical lights of Pyongyang's grandest stage, that she caught the eye of the man who controlled the entire theater. The young, impulsive, and notoriously playboy prince, Kim Jong-il. Soon, Ko was absorbed into Kim's orbit. However, probably because of Ko's abnormal upbringing, she didn't crumble under Kim Jong-il's paranoia and isolation like all his other mistresses. She adapted and invented her own survival mechanism. In the kingdom, a mistress is disposable, but a matriarch is untouchable. The logic is simple. There must be a boy surnamed Kim to succeed the throne. So Ko's strategy was to make herself completely indispensable to a man who trusted absolutely nobody. She became Kim's devoted co-pilot, riding shotgun on his midnight Mercedes joyrides, pouring his finest Hennessy, and playing the dutiful, unquestioning companion. She didn't just survive the harem, but essentially conquered it. Ko became the undisputed queen of mansion number 32. But when the first child was born, things started to get tricky.
Kim Jong-il himself was a very good guitarist, I learned. I took him to music instruments streets in London, which is called Denmark Street, and he visited many guitar shops, and Kim Jong-il even played guitar by himself. And even shop assistant was surprised at the level of his playing and asked him, whether he had any album or yes. So I took.
Ko Yong-hui gave birth to a boy named Kim Jong-chul in 1981, and soon another boy who eventually became the nowadays supreme leader. But this small household's existence became an awkward inconvenience for the kingdom. It's not hard to understand the Ko household's secretive life if we think from Kim Jong-il's perspective. He had already tested his father's patience with his romantic life once before. It was a political disaster, and he didn't want to ruin his father's trust once again. Remember Song Hae-rim? She was the famous North Korean film star Kim Jong-il had an affair with before he met Ko. Song also came with a less prestigious background. She was older, already married, and Kim essentially forced her into a divorce just to claim her. When the great leader Kim Il-sung eventually found out about that relationship, he was furious. In the hyper-conservative patriarchal royal court, a divorced actress was an embarrassment to the sacred bloodline. Kim Il-sung eventually accepted Song's son, Kim Jong-nam, as his legitimate grandson, but still categorically refused to accept Song as a daughter-in-law. Around 1975, Kim Jong-nam was like 4 or 5 years old, and he was formally introduced to the revolutionary grandpa. Afterward, Jong-nam periodically visited Kim Il-sung at the presidential residence, and the benevolent grandpa eventually became fond of him. Lee Han-yong, Jong-nam's cousin who defected to the south in 1982, described Kim Il-sung summoning Jong-nam to his palace, teasing the kid, and indulging little Jong-nam with presents. In 1994, Kim Il-sung reportedly told Jimmy Carter that he enjoyed fishing with his grandson, and asked whether the former US president might bring the grandson on a future visit to the United States. But Kim Il-sung's affection for his grandson did nothing to improve Song Hai-rim's position. In the kingdom, the child could be rescued by his sacred paternal blood, but his mother would forever remain a regrettable administrative detail. According to accounts from her relatives, Kim Jong-il's sister, Kim Jong-hui, eventually told Song that Jong-nam could remain with the Kim family, but Song must leave the household and would be provided for the rest of her life. Song expected a family conversation, but got a royal eviction notice. She was terrified by the forceful separation from her son and suffered intense anxiety, depression, nightmares, insomnia, and nervous exhaustion in her later years. Family accounts say she became pregnant twice more, hoping that another child might further secure her place beside Kim Jong-il, but suffered miscarriages around 1974 and 1977. She was fundamentally rejected by the state, living her days in paralyzing paranoia and eventually being sent into exile in Moscow. It was a sad ending for Song Hai-rim, but a profound lesson for Kim Jong-il. The great leader does not compromise on the purity of the royal household. And if a divorced Korean film star was bad enough, how on earth would Kim Il-sung react to the dancer Ko Yong-hui? Ko wasn't just an entertainer. If Song Hai-rim's background was a headache, according to the North Korean Songbun caste system, Ko Yong-hui was like a radioactive biohazard. If Kim Il-sung found out that his chosen heir was breeding a secondary royal family with a Japanese-born woman of the hostile class, Kim Jong-il probably would lose his successor title entirely. The keys to the kingdom's throne would be handed straight to his rival half-brother, Kim Pyong-il. So, hiding Mistress Ko and her children was a cold but calculated choice. This secondary family, including little Kim Jong-un, was put into the isolated mansion number 32 and completely erased from Pyongyang's political reality. Kim Jong-un grew up in extreme luxury, equipped with private movie theaters and miniature cars, but he was a ghost of the royal Kim clan, unknown by the outside world. But here is where the story pivots from a dark political thriller into an absolute royal family sitcom. You see, sometimes being a ghost comes with some special perks. The matriarch of the hidden palace didn't need outside recognition, but only demanded imperial favor. According to recent interviews with Ko's Japanese relatives, while North Korean state media was busy screaming daily propaganda about the Japanese imperialist war crimes, the dear leader's favorite wife was taking secret, incognito vacations back to Japan. She missed her childhood life in Osaka's Tsuruhashi Koreatown so much that Kim Jong-il even authorized off-the-books travel for her to revisit her old haunts. Just imagine the sheer oddity and absurdity of this. The mother of the Korean nation casually strolling through a Japanese market buying snacks, while her husband's secret agents were actively kidnapping random Japanese citizens off the streets. And this hypocrisy extended into the heavily guarded walls of her golden cage. Ko was a genius of court politics and was never convinced by the Juche rhetoric. In her private mansion, she frequently spoke to her children, including Kim Jong-un, about her memories of Japan, and even taught them some Japanese language. The very country that Kim Jong-un now regularly threatens to turn into a sea of fire with his nuclear arsenal is actually the place his mother lovingly reminisced about at the dinner table. Personality-wise, Ko was particularly strong and savvy. Born as an illegitimate child, she had spent her life learning how to satisfy the needs of the most powerful man in the room. She could read Kim Jong-il's moods, appear completely loyal, never challenge his authority, and successfully distinguish herself from the many other women around the leader without seeming openly ambitious. She clearly understood the rule, so she never wanted to be recognized by the royal Kim clan. Ko used all her advantages to become the future matriarch of a nation. In 1996, partially because Ko was the favorite consort, partially to better hide the kid's existence, the dear leader decided to send the children to study abroad, to get educated in Swiss international schools. Ko's sister, Ko Yong-suk, and her husband, Ri Gang, were trusted with the most sensitive job in the regime and moved to Bern, Switzerland, as the primary caretakers for little Kim Jong-un. To even greater irony, Ko Yong-hui was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1998. Although the auntie had wonderfully performed her duty of raising little Jong-un as a substitute mother, she knew that her sister, Ko Yong-hui, was their only connection to the ruling family. After spending nearly 20 years around Kim Jong-il, the couple knew how cruel the court politics could be. If the consort died or lost the succession struggle, her relatives would no longer be protected insiders, but be purged for their excessive knowledge of the Kim clan. So, in 1998, under the cover of night, Kim Jong-un's aunt and uncle gathered their 3 children, took a taxi to the United States Embassy in Bern, and formally requested asylum. They were transferred to an American military facility near Frankfurt, questioned for several months, and eventually resettled in the United States. It turns out that today, the maternal aunt of the world's most fiercely anti-American ruler lives anonymously somewhere in the United States. They operate a modest dry cleaning business, having exchanged cognac, caviar, and the constant possibility of forced disappearance for 12-hour shifts washing polo shirts for American capitalists. As for Ko Yong-hui, even as the de facto First Lady of North Korea, the country's crumbling socialist medical system couldn't be trusted to save her from the fatal illness. She flew to a hospital in Paris to seek capitalist medical treatments and eventually succumbed to breast cancer there in 2004, dying in a European capital thousands of miles away from the workers' paradise she was repatriated to 42 years ago. When you put all these pieces together, a grandfather who stitched Japanese military uniforms, a grandmother who was a smuggler's mistress, an aunt washing clothes in America, and a mother who died in Paris, you suddenly realize why Kim Jong-un's origins are the most heavily guarded, radioactive secret in Pyongyang. If the North Korean public ever found out that their divine, anti-imperialist god Kim is actually the son of a Japanese-born dancer and the nephew of an imperialist dry cleaner, the entire ideological foundation of the state would instantly evaporate. Kim Jong-un's very existence is the ultimate contradiction to the country's revolutionary narrative, and he will spend the rest of his life ruthlessly erasing the ghost of his own mother just to keep his crown.
That Jang Song-taek, he is the uncle of the leader Kim Jong-un, has been executed. Now, this is a surprise move because until recently, Jang was considered North Korea's second most powerful man. We knew that there was problems in the air, certainly. Earlier this week, images emerged of Jang, who was being led away by uniformed soldiers. That came during a party central committee meeting.
So how does a boy who grew up as a classified biohazard navigate his own family life once he succeeds to the throne? If we do some psychological analysis on Kim Jong-un's childhood experience, you will realize that his entire approach to marriage, fatherhood, and domestic life is a nuclear-armed trauma response. When Kim Jong-un officially took the throne in December 2011, the world's intelligence agencies assumed he would follow his father's totalitarian playbook to the letter. They expected another hermit Kim, a man who would hide in his bunkers, breed a secret harem of disposable mistresses, and keep his children locked away in heavily fortified summer camps. But international observers soon found that Kim Jong-un did the exact opposite. Precisely because he grew up as an invisible ghost whose very face was a threat to the intimate family's survival, his ultimate psychological revenge is to grab the mic, step directly into the spotlight, and force the entire world to focus on him. In the summer of 2012, North Korean state television broadcast something that made seasoned Pyongyang watchers spit out their coffee. During a concert featuring Disney characters and the theme song from Rocky, the Supreme Leader sat in a VIP box. He wasn't alone. Sitting right next to him was a stylish, young, beautiful woman with a short, modern haircut, wearing a chic, Western-style dress. The young marshal was publicly showing off his affection. The leader's lover was not hidden in the shadows, being a nameless consort pouring his drinks and bearing his airs. The Supreme Leader was a very responsible married man and shared the spotlight with his wife. A few weeks later, the state media dropped another bombshell, formally introducing that lady with a phrase that hadn't been heard in North Korea since the 1970s. His wife, Comrade Ri Sol-ju. Remember, for 40 years under Kim Jong-il, the kingdom had no first lady. Women were administrative details. They were the dear leader's wombs, unacknowledged and disposable. But only half a year after succeeding the crown, Kim Jong-un deliberately went against his father's paranoid mistress management style. Ri Sol-ju, luckily, wasn't a hostile class outcast like Kim Jong-un's mother, and therefore was an easier task for the propaganda machine. Born to a professor and an elite doctor, she studied vocal music in China and was a prominent singer in the state's prestigious Un-ha-su Orchestra. As a teen, she had actually visited South Korea in 2005 as part of a cheering squad for the Asian Athletics Championships in Incheon, clapping her hands for inter-Korean unity long before she knew she would marry the supreme dictator in 5 years. Kim Jong-un didn't just bring Ri out of the shadows, but let her accompany him for the diplomatic trips, like a normal First Lady. In April 2018, during the historic Inter-Korean Summit, Ri Sol-ju accompanied Kim Jong-un to the banquet. When she spoke to the South Korean President, Moon Jae-in, she referred to Kim Jong-un using the phrase "Je Nampyeon," which translates simply to "my husband." For a Westerner, that sounds entirely normal. But in the kingdom, this was culturally staggering. Citizens are legally required to refer to Kim as the respected supreme leader. For a woman to casually call the living god of Pyongyang "my husband" in front of foreign cameras was a calculated flex. It meant that Kim Jong-un had a very normal, stable, modern nuclear family. Later that same year, state media officially upgraded her title from Comrade to Respected First Lady. It was an unheard of title among North Korean citizens. the kingdom suddenly had a queen. Kim even gifted Ri a few Christian Dior handbags and Chanel-style tweed suits. Comrades, enjoying French luxury in private is one thing, and showing out capitalist consumerist culture in the socialist paradise is another. Kim Jong-un was sending a vicious message to the old guard of the royal court. He had declared that he wasn't the same as his father and never would hide his loved ones for political power. His love is legitimate, his wife is legitimate, and everyone must bow to the queen. Kim Jong-un probably did all of these because he rejects his father in his subliminal mind and has a complicated mother complex. Think about it. Ko Yong-hui was a standout dancer in the Mansudae art troupe. Ri Sol-ju was a lead vocalist in the Unhasu orchestra. Both women were selected out of North Korea's elite performative arts apparatus for their beauty, poise, and stage presence. Publicly honoring his artist wife was, by extension, publicly honoring the matriarch of the nation and acknowledging his never-acknowledged mother. Moreover, because his father forced him into non-existence, the severe resentment pushed him to do the exact opposite. Once in power, he shared the spotlight with his loved one, held her hand in front of state media cameras, and later brought their daughter Kim Jong-il to all important venues, particularly to those missile launches. Kim Jong-un knew better than anyone that in the Kim dynasty, blood does not mean unconditional love, but is a political liability. But as a real man, the supreme leader voluntarily took on this love responsibility and proudly announced his nuclear family to the world. Whether you politically agree with our respected supreme leader or not, you must agree that he's really a man, a responsible husband in terms of private life. But playing the role of a modern, loving family man in front of the cameras didn't mean Kim Jong-un forgot the brutal lessons of the royal snake pit. This brings us to the darkest, most terrifying chapter of his family life. What do you do with the people who treated you like a dirty secret? What do you do with the royal gatekeepers who controlled the palace while your mother was dying of breast cancer in Paris? You execute them. For Kim Jong-un's entire childhood, his aunt Kim Kyung-hui and her husband, the incredibly powerful uncle Jang Song-taek, were the regents of the kingdom. They were the ones who managed the secret mansions. They knew about the Zainichi Japanese bloodline and disdained Kim's mother for it. They knew every vulnerability, every secret, and every embarrassing detail of Kim Jong-un's phantom youth. Some sources claim that it was precise Uncle Jang who barred little Kim from meeting his grandpa. The first-generation great leader had never met, and perhaps had never learned about, the third-generation supreme leader. When Kim Jong-il died, Uncle Jang essentially acted as the shadow emperor, holding the young Kim's hand and trying to guide him like a puppet. In December 2013, Kim Jong-un showed the world what he really thought of this unnecessary extended family. During a massive Politburo meeting broadcast on national television, state security guards marched down the aisle, grabbed Uncle Jang out of his chair, and dragged him away in front of hundreds of terrified generals. Days later, the state announced that his own uncle had been executed, obliterated by anti-aircraft machine guns at a military academy. The state media released a remarkably personal denunciation of Jang, calling him worse than a dog and human scum. But beneath the political charges of factionalism and corruption, this was the ultimate psychological liberation. The phantom boy had finally killed the warden of his childhood cage. And he didn't stop there. He knew that his older half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, the child of the actress Song Hye-rim, the boy who actually got to go fishing with the grandfather, was still out there living in Macau, occasionally speaking to Japanese journalists. As the eldest son, Jong-nam was the traditional Confucian heir, a living, breathing alternative to Kim Jong-un's rule. In 2017, Kim Jong-un solved that family dispute permanently. He ordered a team of assassins to smear highly lethal VX nerve agent on his half-brother's face in the middle of a crowded Malaysian airport. Within 20 minutes, the eldest son of the Kim dynasty was long gone. Kim Jong-un had successfully cleaned house. He had erased the old guard, murdered his sibling rival, and buried the radioactive ghosts of his father's harem. The stage was finally set for him to be himself, to prove himself as a real family man. The final and perhaps most surreal chapter in Kim Jong-un's ongoing family spectacle must be the sudden public exposure of his daughter, Kim Jong-il. In November 2022, state television broadcast photos of the supreme leader walking hand in hand across a launch pad with a young girl in a white puffer jacket and red shoes, casually inspecting a massive Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile. The image was so bizarre and jarring that it broke the global internet overnight. To international intelligence agencies, it looked like a sudden dynastic succession play. But if you view it through the lens of Kim Jong-un's childhood trauma, you realize that Ju-a's hyper-visibility could be another act of psychological recompensation. Think about this grotesque contrast. When little Kim Jong-un was her age, he was a living biohazard. He was locked away in mansion number 32, forbidden from stepping outside, hidden from his own grandfather, and raised by bodyguards whose primary mission was to ensure nobody knew he existed. His father, Kim Jong-il, treated his children like classified state secrets because he was terrified they would be used as political leverage against him. He is essentially shouting across time to his dead father, his executed uncle, and the entire old court. Look at my child. This is my bloodline. We are not hiding in subterranean bunkers anymore. I am not ashamed of my family and not afraid of those palace coups. Kim Jong-un turns the Kim family's dynasty playbook upside down. Historically, successors in the kingdom were kept strictly out of view until they were grown men with established institutional credentials in the party or the military. Kim Jong-il wasn't officially presented as heir until his 30s. Kim Jong-un himself wasn't introduced to the public until 2010. Barely a year before his father died. But our current supreme leader constructed his daughter's public authority when she was just a schooler. State media initially called her the beloved child, then quickly upgraded her title to the respected child, a sacred title reserved almost exclusively for the leader. In sum, understanding Kim Jong-un's childhood trauma helps us better understand his political acts. When you step back and look at the familial lore of the Kim family, you realize that it is not a simple, heroic revolutionary dynasty. There are 3 generations of imperial trauma playing out on a geopolitical stage. There is a founding grandfather, Kim Il-sung, who erased early wives to craft an immaculate founding myth. There is a playboy father, Kim Jong-il, who locked his secret consorts in golden cages to survive a bloody palace battle against his stepmother. And finally, there is Kim Jong-un, a man who was so deeply scarred by growing up as an invisible ghost that he cured his shadowy past by turning his wife, his daughter, and his nuclear arsenal into a mandatory global soap opera. Kim Jong-un proved that in the kingdom, The only way to heal the wounds of an invisible childhood is to make sure your family is so hyper-visible and so terrifyingly armed to become a real man that no one on earth will ever dare to look down or look away.